human is born, they're already filled with an intuitive knowledge of centuries and centuries of people beforehand. A child has wisdom, cells have wisdom. And the issue is, if we listen to that wisdom, then it's very instructive and tells us about life. If we ignore it because of our hubris that, oh, we're intelligent, the baby's not intelligent, we'll tell the baby what to need, then what we're really doing is stepping on Mother Nature's natural intelligence. And so it's really incumbent upon us to let go and follow the natural instincts. When you're living in harmony, you can feel it. When you're pushing on the system, if you're sensitive enough, you can feel you're doing that.
I'd like to have the left hemisphere of the brain, our intellect that gets trained by the New York Times and Harvard and Yale and everything, become a good servant to the brain in our heart and the brain in our gut. Then we'd have true wisdom.
A baby eagle, when it's born, it has a mucous membrane around the eyes. And within that is an intelligent chip or an intuitive chip or an instinctual chip. And as they're soaring and making flight, they have to return back to the original place to mate. And if they get going in the wrong direction, because they go days and days away from their home, this chip will announce to the physical body that they're going the wrong direction by a throbbing motion inside their body, which awakens their knowingness to turn and go another direction until they get to the right direction. So in thinking about humans, that we all have that intelligence, true intelligence chip on the inside of us. We're born with it. But so many of us, through the great intellectualism of the West, have stepped away from the realm of intuition.
The concept of trusting our own instinct is foreign, unfortunately, to many women and men, because men have a wonderful instinct and intuition as well. And it has been frowned down upon in our society to look within. But I've found so many people have gone against that voice inside that's actually quite wise and might come from a place that you might not understand intellectually, but it has a voice, and I really encourage people to partner with it.
Cells talk to us, and we can feel it through what we call symptoms or feelings or emotions. It's a response of the cellular community to what we're doing in our lives. Cells are actually reading our behavior and giving us information as whether we're working in harmony with our biology or not in harmony with our biology.
A lot of this natural intelligence is upset and impeded and compromised by cultural practice, but we could never get rid of it all. If a mother just simply opens to the fact that her heart has an incredible intelligence and will direct her, guide her, prompt her to do the right thing with her upcoming infant, with her pregnancy, she'll have a completely different outcome.
If you go into a bookstore, there's maybe 30 books on pregnancy and childbirth. I did this once. And I looked at all of these books, and about 25 of these books said, trust your doctor, trust your doctor, do what the doctor says. They were just turning the whole thing over to the doctor. And then there were about 5 books that said, trust yourself. Those are the books to find, and those are the books to read.
I like to think of other people, professionals, as consultants to us as parents. We want to go out and get a lot of input into what we need to know about our children, but we have to make the final decisions, and we'll be the ones that will live with those decisions. I believe that even if you later look back on a decision and wish you hadn't made it, if you fully researched it, looked into it as much as you can, and brought consciousness to it, then you will be fine with whatever decision you made. If, on the other hand, you make a decision because everyone else is doing it, you didn't think about it, you didn't even know there was a choice, you will feel devastated if later on you feel that there was something else you might have done.
When our actions are so important that we're deciding how a baby is born, how we're impacting their development, and how we respond to their growing up, and how we respond to the challenges, and when that means that they're going to be forever different as an adult, and they're going to be forever different when they have children, I think if we really took a moment to ponder that, then our decisions would be made with a little more perspective a little slower. We'd be willing to seek out a birth experience or a pediatrician or a physician who's going to honor our journey and help us to be better through it.
If our children are going to flourish and be able to have what it takes to not just survive, but thrive, we can't consider pregnancy a 9-month grace period before parenting really begins. We have to understand that pregnancy, fetal development, and then the early months postpartum and breastfeeding, this is what I call nature's Head Start program.
We often talk about pregnancy only in terms of the mother, only in terms of her experience. But we know from studies about pre-birth that babies have consciousness even before birth.
From the end of the second trimester, the unborn child is a sensing, feeling, remembering, and conscious human being. That we know for a fact.
It's really important to recognize that the mother's thoughts and beliefs and attitudes are turned into chemistry that control the physiology of her body. And when she's carrying a child, then her thoughts and her beliefs and attitudes are not only affecting her physiology, it's also affecting the physiology of the child. We used to think that just nutrition was provided by the mother in developing a child, and the story was genes control the development, the mother just provides nutrition. We now know, of course, that there's more than just nutrition in blood. In blood is all the information about emotions and the regulatory hormones and the growth factors that control the mother's life in the world that she's living. And so basically, this information also passes into the placenta as well as the nutrition. So if the mother is happy, the fetus is happy because the same chemistry of emotions that affect the mother's system cross into the fetus and affect the fetus. If the mother is scared or stressed, the same stress hormones cross and adjust the fetus.
A woman's emotional state has a profound effect on the growth of her infant in her womb. If she feels good about herself, that it's a good world and she's in love and charity with her neighbor, then the great Darwinian evolutionary process says, well, it must be a pretty good world out there. We can go for our higher intelligence with this birth, with this upcoming infant. And we won't have to protect ourselves as much.
If the mother's stressed, the baby is getting the message that it's coming into a stressful environment, so it adapts its brain, it grows its brain to be hypervigilant and to be hyper-responsive to stress. And that's not something that's going to give the child optimal lifelong health and well-being.
The truth about brain construction is that it is relational. It is interactive. That brain will develop according to the interactions that are taking place with the environment. And who's the biggest environment? It's the mother. Fathers have their place. They contribute importantly to that environment. But where does the baby live? Inside the mother.
When a mother is responding to a stressful situation, two fundamental things happen when you get into fight or flight, that adrenal system. Number one, you squeeze the blood vessels in the gut. And this causes the blood to go to the arms and legs because the blood is the energy, so that I can run, fight, or flight. So I squeeze the blood vessels in the gut with stress hormones, pushing the blood to the arms and legs for my fight or flight behavior. It also switches the blood vessels in the brain for this reason. In a stressful situation, you don't depend on conscious reasoning and logic, which is forebrain. You depend on hindbrain reactivity and reflexes. That's the fastest response in a threatening situation. So the stress hormones that cause the blood vessels in the gut to constrict also cause the blood vessels in the forebrain to constrict. And that pushes the blood to the hindbrain so that the reflexes can activate those arms and legs and provide for a safe response. I go, well, that's cool for the mother, but I said, what about for the developing fetus? I said, well, the hormones pass into the placenta, have the same effect. The significance is the forebrain is consciousness and awareness. You can reduce the intelligence of a child up to perhaps 52% by environmental stressors because of shunting the blood from the forebrain and developing a large hindbrain.
This should be on every headline, in every newspaper. It should be on every television program. It should be throughout the whole land. This is the biggest news we ever heard, and scientific backing for it, that a mother's emotional state enters into as one of the participating causes of the shape, size, function, and characteristic of the brain in her infant in her womb. And that if she's given a safe, nurturing environment herself, her infant will be born with a totally different brain than it will otherwise. This is huge news.
It's important to remember that when a mother is in a good state of health and happy and looking forward to having a baby, that these are the kinds of things that will put the baby into a bubble, into a really protective bubble, and short-term stresses, running after a streetcar or hearing something on the radio or television that upsets you, is not going to have any effect on the baby. That's fine. When I talk about stress that is producing adverse reactions in the baby, I'm talking about long-term stress or an acute stress of some duration.
If the woman can understand that everything that she's experiencing, everything, the way she's looking upon life is instructions getting downloaded to this baby. It doesn't have to be this daunting, oh my God, everything I eat. Let's look at it from the empowerment side. Wow, I have this opportunity. The beautiful privilege of being a human being is that we can bring consciousness in. We can change the nature of our experience just through the way we think about it.
So if a woman would understand that during the moment of conception and all the months of gestation, she is truly, in my eyes, in a way equal to God, because she's in the process of creating. She's creating a human being, and she is creating the way that baby will perceive the world. So what we need to do in our culture is we need to take much better care of our pregnant women. Because if they create truly the consciousness of the next generation, imagine that if it would be done with love, safety, nurturing, healthy food, less stress, what the world could look like in one generation of consciously conceived children.
When we're pregnant, it's such a great time to explore all the different modalities of nurturing yourself, keeping yourself in an optimal place.
It's just such a tremendous giving that we're doing. It's got to be that we're the priority.
If we want our baby to really come into a peaceful, joyful state, we need to work on our own hormonal environment. We need to look at what are we doing in our life? How can we during pregnancy reduce stress and bring more pleasure, more joy into that experience so our baby begins to develop a bath of hormones that support that.
We're always multitasking and doing more things at a time than we need to be doing, and it's easy just to not stop and take a break and sit back and just sort of be a human being instead of a human doing all the time, and we need a balance.
Pregnancy forces you to be a little more quiet. It forces you to sleep a little more, to not be running around so much just from the physical aspect of it. And I think out of that comes an opportunity to have reflection and to have a bit of solemn introspection that we tend to avoid in today's world.
You can look at pregnant women that first trimester and they need extra sleep. And this is a time we need to listen to our body. Don't ignore those cues. Getting an afternoon nap if you can. And if you're needing to work, sometimes even just 15 or 20 minutes in meditation, finding a place or a space that you can even just sit and do some simple breathing can be really important.
I think that yoga at this point in meditation is probably the strongest offering that anyone can give to pregnant women. To actively move your body, to breathe, to close your eyes, to meditate, to go inside where your baby is, and in that communication of breath, yoga, meditation, I've watched transformations, because out of that you come to know your own truth.
Who do you want to be as a mother, as a father, as a parent?
You start hearing your inner voice of how you want to have this pregnancy. Your food choices get better. Your choice of birthing gets better. It doesn't come just with intellectual knowledge. It has to come experientially. Best way is through breath. To ease tension, fears, anxiety, to get clarity, to get strong, it all comes through breath. And the best way I found breath to be is through yoga.
I encourage women to listen to their bodies. You know, we are so honed and attuned to our environment. We know what people we can be around. We know what foods we can eat. All we have to do is smell something to know if we can or can't put it in our body. The same is true with exercise. Can I spin? Can I do yoga? Listen to your body. You're gonna know when it's time to slow down.
Sometimes I think the way people exercise almost adds more stress. That now I gotta get to the gym and I gotta put on my gym clothes and I watch TV and listen to my loud music as I'm running on the treadmill. Sometimes it's better to not add more heat into the pressure cooker as well. And doing exercises that are more conducive to relaxation while it's energizing the body. Things like walking in nature, being absolutely present with the walk, listening to the sounds, really seeing what's around you instead of being consumed by the things that I have to do when I get back. Just trying to be mindful. Oh yes, next foot, next foot, next foot.
It's about cultivating the ability to be present in this moment and just be here. And that's become harder and harder throughout our technological revolution, where we have ever more opportunities for distraction, ever more things pulling at us, at our attention.
I'm just always amazed if you can get to the ocean, for example, just for a walk, and you realize kind of how small you are in the universe and how small your problems really are relative to the perfection of the universe. That can actually help clear your mind. So a walk in the woods, even just getting outside, even if you live in the city, and just kind of taking a brisk walk, letting yourself clear out the stresses. It's kind of a natural time of emotional upheaval, and I want women to be able, and couples to be able to sort of embrace that and go with that and do the work of being pregnant. And that work is preparation for being a good parent. And so if you have an emotional upheaval in pregnancy, that's fine. That's what you're supposed to do. And if a woman is experiencing these feelings during pregnancy, I think the most important thing is to acknowledge them. You can journal about them, you can talk with your partner about them. Talking with other girlfriends who have been pregnant can be really helpful. A lot of times women think that they're experiencing something inside themselves and they're the only one who's ever experienced it. And then you sit around with a group of moms and they're like, I felt that too, or I thought that too. And you realize quite how normal you are. And even that can take the feelings down a notch just by realizing you're not alone in it.
I also think that massage, taking an opportunity, whether it's once a week or every other week, to get a full body massage, to really allow yourself to let those endorphins and your oxytocin and your hormones flow, and to relieve any stress and just the common aches and pains of pregnancy. It's a real nurturing thing. And this could be done by a professional. It can also be loving touch from a partner. And what better way to begin to prepare for labor and birth than to find the kind of touch and things that relax you, bring you comfort, and if this is with a loving partner, maybe to bring you pleasure, because these same things will help you in birth. I'd also encourage pregnant women to explore modalities like chiropractic. We know that when women have good chiropractic care, their body is in real good order, that it's much more likely the baby will enter the pelvis in good position and have an easier labor. Acupuncture is another modality that seems very beneficial for pregnant women. So there are many modalities, craniosacral. I would say really explore what's out there.
You are one with another being, so you change dramatically in relationship to that other being and in service to that other being. I always ask the question, when do you become a mother? When do you become a mother? Not just when the baby's born. You become a mother the first time you dream of that baby, and especially when that baby begins to grow in your body. So you have a responsibility and also an opportunity to really look at your life then and say, how do I want to live my life if I know that my body is serving another human being? Do I want to change my habits? Do I want to take better care of myself, eat better? Really, again, bring consciousness to this experience.
You're building a human being, You're building a little 7-pound newborn out of an embryo. And it makes no sense to me not to run the entire 9 months absolutely perfectly. I mean, no matter what you eat prior to pregnancy, why not eat absolutely perfectly during your pregnancy?
We are giving so much metabolically to the process of gestating a baby, and then postpartum we're breastfeeding. So, that's 2 people who are surviving on the nutrition that's going into 1 person. You really want to make sure that what you're eating during the prenatal period, what you're eating preconception, and certainly postpartum is the best of the best.
We need to really look at, what a healthy diet is. It doesn't just mean you're getting your food at the health food store. It means you're really eating a balanced diet out of what food groups our bodies need.
It's very simple. Anything that grows in the ground, anything that you pull off a tree, anything that walks on the ground, anything that swims in the sea, and anything that flies in the air is food. Anything that is a facsimile of those foods is less and less a real food. And so we would never put anything but gasoline in the gas tank, because we want the best things that are going to make all of our machines work. The body is no different.
What's happening today is you go into a supermarket and you have 6,000 choices, and 90% of those are not real food. Packages with long ingredient lists I would be wary about, especially if you read the ingredient list and it doesn't sound like food. So basically, if it doesn't sound like food, it ain't food. So what do you eat? You eat vegetables, you eat fruits, you eat nuts and seeds, you eat whole grains, you eat beans, fish, chicken, eggs, meat. It's not so odd when you think about history. That's what people have always eaten, real food.
What you need is a really healthy diet that feels good to you. You need a fair amount of protein. You shouldn't waste calories on potato chips and cookies. I also think that the type of protein you eat makes a difference.
You can do a pregnancy totally vegetarian, but I'll include all the food groups. So healthy meats. Meats should always be organic, in my opinion. We cannot even begin to think of what is going into animals, the way they're raised. I mean, even just on a basis of stress hormones, all the things that we're ingesting when animals are not raised in a conscious way.
I'm a very big fan of organic foods in general, and I think it's very important that pregnant women and nursing women really commit themselves to eating as organic a diet as they can. I think that's a very critical way to help your developing baby inside, and then your young baby through early life, to be able to grow up as free of all the pesticides and chemicals and hormones that are in the foods. Pesticides that are in conventional fruits and vegetables and other foods are directly toxic to nervous tissue. That's how pesticides work. They kill the nervous systems of insects, and humans have the same susceptibility. When we consume pesticides and those pesticides go to our brains, they kill off a few brain cells. As adults, we can probably handle some of that, but a developing baby whose brain is trying to grow and expand, they can't. They can't handle that. I think it's very critical for parents to pay close attention to organic eating during pregnancy and lactation, and then during their children's early life.
Even if you can't afford everything organic, the basic things like dairy, meats, things that are going to really be more rich in pesticides or environmental contaminants, because fats tend to hold those more.
In terms of organically raised food, here's where we get into a problem with fish, because the best kind of fish is the fish that swims in the ocean, and it's wild fish. If it says organic, that means it's farmed. If it's farmed, it's been given food pellets of some kind. And I know that corn and soy are in the fish food. Now, last I looked, fish in the ocean and fish in the rivers do not eat corn and soy. And the idea of eating a fish that's been given corn and soy, it just doesn't go.
We need to be really careful with fish when we're pregnant. Babies are already born at or above the accepted mercury level for human beings. So keeping fish to a minimum during pregnancy, unfortunately, is kind of what we have to do. So really not more than once a week, and I would pretty much avoid canned tuna entirely during pregnancy. On the other hand, it's really important during pregnancy, especially when the baby's brain is growing and is made largely of fat and requires a lot of fat and a lot of carbohydrate energy to grow and develop, to get adequate fats. But those fats need to be from high quality oils. So for example, olive oil is the best oil we can get, oils from nuts and seeds that are fresh and not rancid, and then also essential fatty acids, which largely come from, unfortunately, cold water fish, but there are some really good essential fatty acid supplements that you can get really high quality. So the omega-3s, the omega-6s, those all come in these essential fatty acids.
Fat is one of the 3 macronutrients. We got protein, we got carbohydrates, and we got fat. And it has an important part in human nutrition. And for a variety of reasons, it got truly demonized in the last 15 years or so. This is not a good idea. We need enough fat.
Every cell membrane contains fat. And there are parts of the body where there are mostly fat particles in the body. The brain, the eyes, the skin. And so when we tell people to eat a low-fat diet, or we tell people to eat less fat, we are really doing a disservice. There are healthy saturated fats. There are healthy polyunsaturated fats. There are healthy monounsaturated fats. So people think coconut is bad for you because it has a lot of saturated fat. Coconut is not bad for you. Eating tons of coconut will be bad for you.
Eating small meals throughout the day rather than large meals when our blood sugar has plummeted. Keeping the blood sugar within a level range. When the blood sugar levels rise and fall, again, the stress hormones are activated to close that gap, to put us back in a state of normalcy. So eating small, healthy meals throughout the day is one of the greatest things that you can do for internal stress.
There are numerous studies from really established physicians and research scientists looking at how this stress response actually feeds into and then is sort of reinforced by the American diet. So one of the most important things to do is just as quickly as possible modify your diet away from that fast food American way of eating, which amazingly even people who are on a healthy organic diet can actually still be doing. I mean, healthy sodas still have 8 teaspoons of sugar in them, just like a regular soda. And sometimes women become pregnant and they think, oh, now I'm pregnant, I can eat anything. And then just kind of abandon a healthy diet and sort of just start plowing down on the carbohydrates or the ice cream. And that's not healthy either, because then we end up with obesity starting during pregnancy for the baby. We end up with babies that are too large, and moms end up with gestational diabetes, which is not healthy either and leads to a lot more obstetric interventions.
There's a balance that is already innately programmed into us and that we know about without knowing it with our left brain. Our body knows it. And that'll make us go craving things. I think it's a good idea for a pregnant woman to listen to what her body's asking for, as long as a woman is eating basically whole foods.
We can see that when you eat well, you're most likely not to develop a lot of those high-risk conditions that can develop during pregnancy. There's no reason why when a woman eats well, exercises, maintains limited stress, that she can't have a fantastic pregnancy and a fantastic birth, and really a fantastic postpartum.
It's an unfortunate situation in our world because we're learning individuals. We learn about life through our experiences. To observe how many times the process of birth is portrayed as a violent, painful process. Because if that's what we focus on, then that's what we are looking for. We're looking for that pain and violence because we expect it. And so the issue is, by having these old stories about women screaming and yelling and all the anxiety of this is very detrimental to a woman who is in the process of, or about to give birth. Because there's actually another way to give birth. It's much more an ecstatic kind of birth.
When I was writing The Guide to Childbirth, I was really wrestling with how do you deal with a generation of women, a large majority of whom are scared of the bodies they live in. They've been terrorized, you know, and they actually think that surgery is going to be the easy out. And it's not, you know. Sometimes it's necessary, very rarely if everything's right. But so I want them to understand they're made to have a baby, you know. They're made to have a baby without damage.
I think women need to be taught how to trust themselves and sort of undo the messages that they've seen from the time they were really young children, whether it's in movies or stories they've heard, all the horror stories about childbirth. It's almost like we need to unlearn everything we've learned about birth so that we can sort of step out of our own way and let our bodies do what our bodies are actually fully prepared to do.
It's normal to wonder what this process of labor and birth and welcoming this baby from your body to your arms will be like. But get information. I think knowledge is really power, and knowledge is one way of addressing fear. And I've long said, if you don't know your options, you don't have any. Many people today are really only seeing a slice of the pie that's available in birth. And sadly, many of our hospitals are only offering a very narrow range of choices.
So many of the conventional childbirth classes, especially the ones that are taught in hospitals, really have nothing to do with how to give birth. They only have to do with how to be in the hospital environment and what the hospital is going to do and expect and what interventions you're going to get.
You should explore, what does birth look like in a home birth setting with a really qualified care provider? What does birth look like in a birth center with good care providers? And what are the range of options you have within a hospital? And then I would encourage you, go interview those care providers. Talk to people in different settings. When it comes to labor, we know that warm water can be helpful, using balls, movement, dance, massage, touch, acupressure, listening to nice music, aromatherapy. There are so many things that you can use that help make labor easier. Doulas, another woman that's there to offer you comfort, emotional support, and encouragement, has been shown again and again to reduce the rates of interventions, to shorten labor and make it more pleasurable. So many people today just feel, oh, you know, I'm watching The Baby Story, or I'm watching television, I'm doing all my reading and I'm prepared. But so often you're only really understanding a fraction of what's out there.
A lot of us get our information from the media, from the internet, from television. These things don't publish normal stuff. They're not interested. It's dramatic. It has to be dramatic, right? Because they want to hold your attention. In low-risk birth, it's not what you see on TV. It's not scary. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's awesome.
In order to really embody the fullness of the moment, it's going to take some work. It's going to take some preparation. It's going to take the retraining of our mind to what this process actually is and what's truly available for us.
I am a very big fan of birth plans. It gives us as a birthing unit, let's say me and the patient and her partner, an opportunity to specifically go through individual desires of how they want to accomplish their birth. We can talk about all these different issues one at a time, why it makes sense to do it the way they want to do it, why sometimes it doesn't work that way, why we sometimes have to make compromises, but it does allow us to have a very well thought up agenda of discussion.
The idea to write your thoughts and ideas about birth down is essential. It really helps us tap into it, to think about it, and to formulate it. And I'd like to call that birth preferences, birth wishes, birth vision, which shows that this is something that can change. We may change our own feelings about what we'd like in birth once we're in the throes of it, or it may be that situations arise and we have to kind of deviate a little bit from what our initial thoughts were.
The birth plan really is a process that I think for a lot of couples and a lot of women is an important experience for them in terms of creating a vision for themselves.
And hopefully she will take this plan to the hospital and discuss it with the hospital staff before labor. Because when the woman's in labor, it's not the time to have to hassle with people about what's going to happen. And hopefully she will settle it with the doctor or the midwife so that they know what she wants and that they will work with her in getting the kind of birth she wants.
I always say to pregnant women and their partners in my classes, don't write what you don't want. Write what you do want. So if you don't want an intravenous drip, which we know from the research, it limits your mobility, it dilutes your hormones. What you do want then is freedom of movement. You want to eat and drink so that you can keep yourself hydrated. You may want to get in a tub or a shower, and you can't do that with an IV. So what you do when you write positive preferences is you reclaim your power, you take responsibility for what you would like, and you share it in a way that other people can honor and respect because it's done with a positive intention. This is a day you're never going to forget. This is a day when you're 90 and you can't remember what you had for dinner last night. You'll remember your birth like it was yesterday. And it's hard to imagine that, but you do. And the feelings will be with you forever if they're feelings of joy, of ecstasy, of bliss, of power. And if they're of regret, sadly, they'll be with you too. So you deserve to really make this something special. You plan many other life events and put a lot of effort into it. And birth, I think, deserves more of your energy, more of your creative intention, more of your intuition, and to really find where, with whom, and how is going to serve you.
A birth is a normal event. Just like a menstrual cycle is a normal event, a conception is a normal event. It's a physiologic event. It is not a medical procedure.
Women's bodies are superbly designed for giving birth. Over millions of years of evolution, in fact, if you look at mammalian evolution, it's 175 million years of evolution. Our bodies, with every generation, our bodies have become better and better at giving birth.
What really happens in birth is that there is an innate chemistry that not only helps relieve mother's pain, but prepares her to be a mother. There's this instinctual intelligence that is unlocked by the biochemistry of birth, so that when the baby is born, the mother is ecstatic, is in love with that baby, her milk lets down, she's ready to breastfeed, and her motherhood begins in a positive note.
It's actually the labor process that is doing the fine-tunings on the preparations to being a parent. It's actually like going through it is the rite of passage or the walk on the coals for the confidence and the skills. It brings forth within you what is necessary to show up when things get tough.
It's intense, but it should be intense. A new life is about to enter this planet, and it doesn't just happen, and it shouldn't just happen. So there is a strength. Women are feeling the power of their bodies so strong that not only did they grow a baby, a human being, from two little half cells that collided at the exact right time and nurtured that little life through 40 weeks of growth, but then their body is so powerful that it expels that little buddy into the world and pushes him onto his journey.
I think all of us who have ever had to work for something and then achieve it, whether it be an athletic goal or an academic goal or a professional goal, there's definitely something sort of, the harder the battle, the sweeter the victory. There's something to be said about the euphoria that we get at the end of that experience.
One of the opportunities in natural childbirth is to allow your body to feel its power, to feel the challenges, to know that this is hard, but you can do it. If you're an athlete, you train for an event, maybe for months, maybe for years, and you know that you're going to hit hurdles. You know if you're running the marathon, you're going to hit a wall. You're going to hit a time that your body's going to say, I don't want to do it. But when you do, your hormones, your endorphins, that runner's high kicks in. And the people on the sidelines are cheering for you to keep going, press through that hurdle, because they know whether you cross first or last, you just crossing that finish line is a personal accomplishment. It's a goal you've trained to. What would happen if along the lines people said, you're having a tough time. Let's give you an IV. You don't need to drink water. Just push the pole along. And if it gets really tough, don't worry about it. We'll give you a little Demerol. We'll hop you on the scooter and we'll drive you to the finish line. You'll still cross, but every runner will know it would never be with the same achievements.
A mother who's had a natural birth ends up with a sense of beautiful fulfillment. You know, I call it birthing ecstasy, the ecstatic hormones, and it's designed to reward the mother. That the hormone beta endorphin is there to tell the mother, you're doing a good job, do it again. You know, because Mother Nature wants us to have lots of babies.
Nature created this entire birthing process. Every step of the way was instrumental and effective in creating a natural, normal development of a human. Significance is when we try to bypass the process or interfere with chemicals and drugs, we are diverting a very natural process of evolution. And every step is an important contribution to the development of the child. For example, in order for a child to do very well in life, it really has to have a crawling period before it starts to do walking. If you try to avoid the crawling and get the child into walking right away, you miss a very important developmental phase that the crawling was introducing. We now find this is true for birthing.
Birth is a big deal, and no parent who's already in tune with the baby would just take that casually. Actually, the baby ought to be the center around which the birth is designed.
This is this baby's only chance of coming into the world, and I think we should really follow Mother Nature's blueprint for a birth as closely as possible to give the baby the benefit of what it should have experienced in labor and birth.
When you can navigate the experience of childbirth as you would a peak experience of your life, when you navigate it with courage and creativity, there is, as you would expect, an inherent system to support you. But we've forgotten that wisdom, and we can remember it by simply again going back to trusting the fact that how many millions of women have given birth throughout time in a way that unlocked for them that innate intelligence and gave them the opportunity to begin their parenting experience in confidence.
Women have been bamboozled to believe something about labor. We have, been fed through the media channels. We've been given pictures. We've seen women in labor in movies, and these images of labor are frightening. You know, why would you want to go through that kind of experience when you see how painful it is and how much we lose control? And inside of that, women are choosing to automatically go to drugs, and they're really missing out on a profound opportunity. I like to think of it as an entitlement of what it is to experience everything that the body has, this miracle of birth, this connection with our children as they are being born. I see so many women go through the labor process, and as we get closer and closer to the birth moment, there is a profound, almost ecstasy that comes across a woman's face and body. She is so in it, and she has so freely given herself over to this process, which is extraordinary. It's nothing short of extraordinary. It's nothing short of being probably the most extraordinary moment or day of the life of anybody who's attending this process. So allowing that to be there biologically, we are pumping so full of hormones, and those hormones connect us to our baby's experience and connect our baby to our experience.
What women should know and what should be mandatory learning for all girls in schools is the way your body has an intricate design of hormonal release during pregnancy, labor, and birth and beyond.
The 4 hormones that I talk about, which I call the ecstatic hormones of undisturbed birth, because they add up to ecstasy, as you'll see, and because they are optimally expressed when the mother is undisturbed in her labour and birth. Oxytocin, the hormone of love; beta endorphin, hormone of pleasure and transcendence, as I call it; epinephrine, norepinephrine, hormones of excitement; and prolactin, the hormone of tender mothering.
There is absolutely nothing that can compare with that specific cocktail of hormones that her own brain chemistry is producing and flooding her with.
Levels of these hormones build up during labour, and they orchestrate some of the actual processes of labour and birth. But as well as this, they enhance ease and pleasure and safety for mother and baby. They also optimise that transition for the mother to motherhood, and they optimise the processes of breastfeeding and attachment, which are the basis of species survival. So the hormone oxytocin is released from the posterior pituitary gland in the limbic system. It's actually made in the hypothalamus. And when it's released in the posterior pituitary, it's released into the body. So it has these physical effects on the body. In labour, it causes the rhythmic contractions of labour. That obviously helps the baby to be born. At the same time, it's being released within the limbic system, the relational brain.
In our brain, we have brain receptors, and some of the oxytocin binds there and gives us a sense of well-being, a pain reliever, a sense of euphoria and heightened levels.
It's a hormone that is of such crucial importance. Researchers are calling it the hormone of love.
When we begin to alter the mother's chemistry, and that's as simple as an IV, we put an intravenous drip into her bloodstream, it dilutes her hormones down. So often that in itself will slow labor, and now will give her synthetic oxytocin.
The use of synthetic oxytocin during labour, which is called Pitocin or Syntocinon, is widespread throughout Western systems of maternity care. One of the reasons that it's so often used is because we're not providing physiological conditions for women in childbirth. We're not providing conditions where they feel private and safe and unobserved. Their fight or flight hormones are elevated, their labour's slowing down, and then we're speeding it up again using artificial oxytocin. When we use artificial oxytocin, we're using a chemical that's bioidentical to the oxytocin that we produce in our brain. It's chemically equivalent. However, it works very differently in the body. Oxytocin in the body is produced within the brain. So it has these psycho-emotional effects. It's a hormone of calm and connection, a hormone of love, a hormone with natural pain-relieving properties. When we inject it into the mother's body, it doesn't cross back into her brain, and it doesn't have these beneficial psycho-emotional effects.
So now the brain effect is lost. And without the brain oxytocin, both the mother and the baby are going through an experience that's completely changed. They're feeling more pain. They're not getting this sense of love and joy and bliss and ecstasy.
The other important thing to know about synthetic oxytocin, about Pitocin, is that when it's administered in labour, it's administered in higher doses than a woman would naturally produce. So it causes contractions that are longer and stronger and closer together than would naturally happen at that stage of labour for that mother and baby.
Pitocin contractions are really intense. They don't build up the way a typical labor builds up. They can be very painful.
Pitocin tends to create, I call them jackhammer contractions, instead of the natural ebb and flow of oxytocin.
The catecholamine surge at the end of labour, as the baby's head's moving down, protects the baby from those long, strong, close together contractions. But when they occur at the beginning of labour, the baby doesn't have that protection. So the baby is at risk of a lack of blood and oxygen. And we know this because a woman with a Pitocin drip needs monitoring. The baby's at risk.
Allowing the uterus to contract at a natural rhythm, you are far less likely to stress out the baby and stress out the mother. Now, it may take longer, but if you look at what happens when labors are rushed, we end up seeing a lot more situations where more interventions are necessary.
Pitocin, either induction or augmentation, triples the cesarean section rate. And I think a lot of women need to know that when someone offers you Pitocin to speed up labor, they're really saying that we're giving you a 3-fold increased risk of a cesarean birth. So you really need to ask, why are we speeding up labor? What are the risks that taking more time bring to me or my baby? And what are the benefits? Because the benefits of speeding it up have to outweigh these increased risks.
If a woman knows how her body was truly meant to work, she would choose what would be the best for her and her baby. But because we're not telling her the truth, because most people working in hospitals, including myself, all the years I worked in high-risk labor and delivery setting, low-risk labor and delivery setting, I didn't know about how hormones work. I was one of these nurses saying Pitocin induction, Pitocin contractions was the same as when you would go into labor. It wasn't until I stepped out of the system and started studying so much more about birth, so much more about the natural approach to birth, that I began to see the differences.
The second ecstatic hormone of undisturbed birth is beta-endorphin. Beta-endorphin is the body's natural opiate. It works in the same parts of the brain as Demerol, as heroin, as morphine, but it's a natural painkiller. So as the mother progresses through her labour, beta-endorphin levels rise. The more pain she reports, the further on she is in labour, the more dilated her cervix, the higher her beta-endorphin levels go. And they peak around the time that she pushes her baby out, which is the most intense part of labour, so that's optimal. Beta-endorphin actually activates the reward centres in the mother's brain. So it's Mother Nature saying, you've done a good job, well done, have more babies. And a woman who births and labours under her own steam with these high levels of beta-endorphin will have that sense of, if I can do this, I can do anything.
They give us this really peaceful feeling. And that's why we can get a woman in labor sometimes that's really working with her body in its optimal way. And she looks like her face is in joy and ecstasy. I've seen women that are just laughing in between surges and some that are smiling during them. And that's because this beta-endorphin, this heightened hormonal state, is bringing her into an altered state of consciousness.
In that altered state of consciousness, they will tune into their bodies more and they will enact the instinctive movements that will help their baby, because the baby is giving us information all the time about what they want, about what's the optimal thing that we can do to help them get through labour, because it's a process for them as well.
When we start introducing drugs and medications, we begin to really create a separation between what the mother's experiencing and what the baby's experiencing.
The mother doesn't just deliver the baby alone. The baby is involved with the mother. They are a team. The two are powerful, but if they're separated, they lose their power. And certainly when the mother gets anesthetized, so does the baby. And now we have both of the active units disempowered.
I read an article in the New York Times a few years ago, and it was an article about drugs in childbirth. And in the article, the word baby was not mentioned once. There was no reference to the effects of the drugs on the baby. We don't talk anymore about the effects of the drug on the baby. We talk about the pleasure or the lack of pain for the mother.
There's a lot of medications that people take in labor that they don't realize can go through to the baby and affect the baby. The thing that's obvious are people that take narcotic medications. Those narcotics go straight through the placenta to the baby. They can sedate the baby. They can affect the baby, particularly if the baby is born more rapidly than what was anticipated. And they can sometimes lead to babies really having difficulty with respiration and even needing assisted respiration.
The drugs that are injected into the mother's epidural space around her spinal cord go into her bloodstream within 20 minutes, levels peak. Anything that's in the mother's blood crosses the placenta and goes to the baby. So all the drugs that are injected into the mother's epidural space basically end up in the baby, and in some studies, drug levels are higher in the baby than in the mother.
We know that when we take aspirin or we take antibiotics, they're prescribed based on our weight. So when we take drugs in childbirth, they're given to us based on our weight. Imagine how they would affect this teeny little baby. And it's ironic to me that we spend our entire pregnancies trying to do the right thing, eat right, take our vitamins, don't do anything that's going to harm the baby. And then we flood our bodies with chemicals during childbirth and don't give a thought to how that affects the baby.
What happens with an epidural, it's like going to the dentist and having an injection to get a tooth filled. It completely blocks the sensation of pain within the body. So the body thinks that there's no pain, and it thinks it doesn't need these beta-endorphin hormones to help to deal with the pain. So beta-endorphin levels drop very dramatically with an epidural, and a woman at the time of birth with an epidural has about 20% of the beta-endorphin levels of a woman after a normal birth. And again, it's a hormone of pleasure and reward, and what does it mean for a woman after an epidural to miss out on that reinforcing and rewarding and pleasurable hormone? The third ecstatic hormone, or hormones actually, is epinephrine and norepinephrine. These are the fight or flight hormones, and we release them when we're anxious, frightened, hungry, cold, but also excited. You know, we can pay a lot of money to bungee jump, you know, to get a rush of epinephrine, of adrenaline, the other name for it.
We are adrenaline junkies in this culture. I mean, people go around with their vats of coffee and you know, horror movies. I mean, it's all about a thrill and a speed. Yeah, it can be fun. But it's not the one you want when you're having a baby, because your muscles are hard and your heart's pounding away and you're not in your body so much.
Levels of these hormones build up gradually as labour progresses, But there is an effect that happens, and this is a safety factor for mammals giving birth in the wild. If you realise that a labouring female is compromised in her ability to respond to danger, she can't run away easily, and she's going to attract predators because of the amniotic fluid, the blood, the placenta, the baby at the end. So she's actually at great danger giving birth in the wild. So these hormones are there to help to protect herself and her baby. So in the early stages of labour, if a labouring mammal feels unsafe on any level, if she smells a strange smell or hears a rustle in the bushes, she can see another individual, even of her own species, it can activate this fight or flight reflex for her. And what will happen is these hormones will inhibit labour, they actually directly reduce the contractility of her uterus. So they'll give her that break from labour that she needs. Mother Nature's design is that she will run away and then find a safe place, and then the hormone levels will go down and labour will recommence. But the problem in our modern times is that we're putting women into situations where they don't feel private and safe and unobserved, the core requirements for birth in all mammals, and they're labouring with elevations of these hormones. And we know from studies done 20 years ago that when a woman has higher levels of these hormones in labour, her labour will be slower. Yeah, it'll inhibit her contractions. We also know that her baby is at risk of having insufficient blood and oxygen, at high risk of having abnormal fetal heart rate patterns.
Ultimately, we're animals. And when you look at mammals and how they experience labor, they will go to a very dark, quiet, safe space in the bush, under the bed, in the closet. And that's their intuition guiding them into what's going to effectively help the hormones of labor do their thing.
Nobody goes into a barn when a horse is giving birth and shines bright lights and has strange farmers coming in and pokes and prods the horse. We all know with a dog, with a cat, with a horse, with a cow, you keep the environment calm and peaceful, and then the animal gives birth naturally. Humans can do the same thing.
If the stress hormone hits the bloodstream, the cervix locks really tight. It's a way that nature assures the survival of the species. All it takes about half an hour for her to relax the cervix and proceed with giving birth. Modern women use drugs and sharp metal objects in that situation. If they would only know that all it takes is for her to relax, to let the cervix open, that would save a lot of trouble.
The way birth is taught in this country is that it is an emergency until proven otherwise, and that's what I learned in residency. A normal labor and birth is a retrospective diagnosis. So birth is approached as a potential disaster, with everyone standing by waiting for the disaster. Now, that would be fine, except that the emergency mindset is so laden with fear that the laboring woman, who is very porous, picks up on all the fear, and that actually impedes her body's ability to birth naturally and normally. So in my view, it actually favors creating an obstetrical crisis. And in fact, that's what's happened, because we now have in some hospitals up to a 100% C-section rate, and in some hospitals 50%. This is for a normal physiologic process, major surgery.
If you look at birth practices throughout time and in other cultures, the woman's emotional well-being has been prioritised, and we've lost that in our current maternity care system. And I think that really explains a lot of the reasons for our high rates of intervention, where women cannot have a normal hormonal orchestration of birth because the conditions for that physiology to unfold are not being met. So the fourth ecstatic hormone, as I call it, is the hormone prolactin. It's the major hormone of breast milk synthesis. But in fact, levels of prolactin begin to increase during pregnancy. And as with the other hormones, it's released from within the limbic system. And as it's released within the limbic system, it has these positive psycho-emotional effects. So again, this is a hormone that's preparing the mother for maternity. It's adapting her brain to optimally care for her young.
Prolactin is often called the mothering hormone. It really is giving the mother this sense of wanting to connect, of having the time, the space, and the ability, and helping her to prepare and ultimately to breastfeed her baby.
Prolactin has some other very valuable effects for mother and baby. It's a hormone of maternal attachment, paternal attachment as well, but it's a hormone that helps mother and baby to be bonded to each other. It's a hormone that, like oxytocin, reduces stress. That helps the breastfeeding mother to be calm and connected with her baby. It's also a hormone that in studies has been linked to personality traits such as tolerance of monotony. And this is an important adaptation for a breastfeeding mother. It motivates her to be preoccupied with her baby, if you like. She's not going out looking for other forms of stimulation. She's quite content with what's been called ordinary maternal preoccupation. And these things are not just feel good, they're not just about having a good time with your baby, they're actually important for species survival.
Women who experience labor have a higher release of those hormones and may actually be more biologically prepared to enjoy and bond with the baby.
There was some really powerful research done many years ago by two researchers, Klaus and Cannell, at Case Western University, and they studied moms and babies after birth, looking at different kinds of birth experiences and seeing how the mothers related to their children. And they found in their research that those moms that had non-medicated births with this hormonal cocktail that they got as part of that were much more attached to their babies, more interested in them, fell more immediately in love with them, and touched them more than women who had cesarean births or serious interventions during their birth. So they saw that there was something very important that happened right after birth in which a mom, as a human animal, is supposed to attach to this baby in an irrevocable way.
I call it the hormone of tender mothering, but I could call it the hormone of tender fathering, because fathers who are more involved with their babies have higher levels of prolactin, and that's actually true right through the animal kingdom. Fish and birds and other species that, where the father's involved in parental care, have high levels of prolactin. It's the hormone that motivates the penguin fathers to spend those long blizzardy winters with the egg balanced on their foot. I call it the penguin hormone.
It's what makes the man more nurturing. It's what makes the man more wanting to take care of his family afterwards. So imagine the beautiful hormonal exchange taking place between not just the mom and the baby, but also the partner, the father of the baby. And then imagine the epidural being given at 2 centimeters and none of that happening anymore. It is also affecting a relationship between two people that now become parents. And I think that labor, birth, and all of that is leading up to the parenting experience they will have together. And if you've been able to support one another truly and deeply through birth and postpartum, that you will have better abilities to parent your child, because it's what you're being taught. Again, it's Mother Nature's way of instilling a blueprint in you that you can do it. You did that together, you can raise your child together. It's the same as a woman who's given birth to a baby and from that moment on knows you can do anything.
You find a power within yourself that you never knew you had, and you take that power out with you into mothering and into all aspects of your life.
You know, in those very moments leading up to that final culmination when a new person enters the room, that's an important process. There's a lot that happens emotionally and psychologically and physically that allows that birth to take place. You know, babies go through the cardinal movements of labor. They try to work their way into the world and figure out how to get through those bones. Women, their hips open. And I believe that their heart opens. I believe that their mind opens. I believe that they're changed by that process of seeing what an amazing thing their body can do. And that makes them different. It makes them more powerful. It makes them ready, to parent that child.
I see women and men on the other end of this process after they've completely shown up for it with awe of life, with awe towards a miracle of life. The man will look at his partner and she's never going to be anything less than the supreme in his mind. Birth is nothing short of a miracle. I mean, it is the most magical, extraordinary, intense, primal experience of our lives. And when we actually allow ourselves to witness what that is and be a part of that, it will change us forever.
Bountiful am I, blissful am I, beautiful am I. Bountiful am I, Mindful